topic and obviously a huge chunk of the market, but I wanted to try to hone in on cloud specifically and the impact that we're seeing play out on the channel, which in itself is a broad term, and I recognize that. So I'll try to highlight some of the consistencies throughout. So the first comment I want to make is that, based on our recent research on cloud and the channel, its participation is high, actually higher than we initially anticipated. 64% of software channels already offering some kind of cloud solution. But more telling for me was the relative optimism around that. Looking at the percentage of contribution to total revenue, this was what they were anticipating within a year's time. So by 2016, close to 30% of their total revenue coming from some kind of cloud solution. We didn't specify what type of cloud, so this can be open to debate. But I think the key message there is that they're doing it and they're seeing it growing. And there is still a fair amount of resistance, but I don't think as much, certainly not as much as we've seen in previous years. The other key finding for me was that the majority are following a multi-vendor strategy. There are very few that are going all in with a single vendor. But what is telling is that within that, we're starting to see them identify particular vendors as their strategic vendor. So for the last year, pretty much, we've done a huge amount of content and research around this concept of partner of the future. We try to analyze what parts of a channel business model will need to change in the cloud world, or in fact even in the digital world. And this cuts across everything from sales, from marketing, from the type of skills they need to bring in, and the type of technology that is sold. And our core messages here is that there's still a huge amount of business in the traditional on-prem world. By all accounts, for the next 5 years at least, it's still going to account for probably the majority of channel revenue, but it's a flat or declining market. So channels that are very heavily concentrated on the second platform will be competing in a market where they're fighting for market share. And that's going to have its own margin pressure. The second key message around this is, particularly with SaaS, more so than anything else, when you start moving into that subscription revenue model, the shift can't be too hard. There needs to be a period of introduction into the business, because otherwise the impact in terms of cash flow can be really significant. So we are seeing, and I think the question that many of them are facing is, when do we make that move? How do we bring it in? And how do we keep our business running profitably as we make this transition? A couple of other points I want to bring out is that we believe that to be relevant, channel partners need to bring in a degree of specialization. The days of these kind of broad-based, very resell heavy, we sell multiple vendors, we sell multiple products, the value proposition in there is going to decline over time, and certainly the margin opportunity is going to decline over time. And so it's a big shift to make, but looking at building out pockets of specialization, whether that be at a horizontal or vertical level, we believe is going to be critical moving forward. IT is becoming a lot more commoditized. Customers are self-educating. Customers are building their own innovation teams. They're bringing in DevOps into their environments. They're bringing in capabilities that are actually pretty sophisticated. So to have relevance as a partner selling into these clients, you need to have that degree of specialization. The next big impact we see is in terms of the activities. So I spoke very quickly about the impact that moving into a subscription model has. The other impact is that the money generated from resale is obviously going to decline over time as we move into an as-a-service model. So it's critically important that proactively address acknowledge and address the revenue loss that you're going to get from typical resale. So what we're seeing is partners start to look at not only professional services wrapped around cloud, but looking to automate those and become more repeatable in a managed services model. And the ones that do this successfully start to gain significant profit gains. So a typical resale GP would be about 5 to 10, 15% depending on the product. When you move into a well-automated remote managed service, you can get up to 35, 45%. And the next layer of this is looking to package your IP. So this really plays well to those channel partners that have a good apps business or have a big develop opportunity, but really trying to look at packaging very unique or specific IP, either through an app or a software extension, or increasingly looking at some areas of analytics, so bringing database IP and looking at ways of creating products around that to provide benchmark and those kind of solutions. And the kind of margins that are being realized when they do this is up to 75–85%. So the smarter channel partners and the more agile ones, they're really starting to focus on those layers, and they're putting their best people and best resources in there. Finally, and I think critically important, and I think everyone in this room has a role to play in this, with the pace of change, with the types of the fundamental shift we're seeing in terms of customer behavior and buying behavior, there's real demand for specialization, the real need to be able to provide a more holistic solution, to use cloud as a foundation for a digital or broader business transformation. There are very few partners that are going to be able to do all of that by themselves. And so we are going to have to go through a kind of development of an ecosystem. And that's challenging. There is always going to be a degree of co-opetition. You're very unlikely to find two-channel partners that complement each other where there's no conflict. But we are starting to see these kind of alliances come to market. We see it with an SI partnering with a hoster, for example, and partnering with an industry player to target a specific vertical. We're seeing industry alliances come to market with an industry player partnering with a channel partner, using their data as an IP and creating products into market. So those borders are changing, and I think this enabling those partners to meet each other and to find each other and to be able to jointly develop those solutions and create a structured approach to that is going to become very, very important. But my key message is that, the IT industry has been pretty good to the channel for a good 20, 30 years. I come from the channel, I know it's not easy. But there's been a significant resale business, but it's becoming a lot harder to justify. And it's certainly a model that is under pressure. So whatever competitive advantage you have today, acknowledge that it's a transient competitive advantage. And the challenge with that is you need to be constantly developing for the future, and there's a degree of risk-taking in that. Trying to identify what those pockets of specialization would be, trying to identify who those partners would be, and looking at ways of packaging and selling your own IP. So how are we seeing this play out? I think in the cloud world, scale, once you've started embarking on this, what you recognize that scale is critically important in order to start making real money from it. So this is leading to a lot of acquisitive activity, and a lot of that has been around geo-expansion more than capability. So we're seeing a lot of acquisitions trying to get that kind of globalized scale. Also seeing it as a way to counteract what is perceived as a hyperscale threat. We're seeing distributors move into the marketplace space, and we've seen aggressive activity around that in Europe, and all relatively new. We're seeing the borders blurring between different partner types. I called out two logos there. So PwC now probably has one of the biggest Oracle practices in the UK, based on an acquisition that they made of Mocam. If you look at the kind of acquisitions they've made over the last 2 to 3 years, a lot of it has been data analytics, a degree of cloud and enterprise application skills. So they're competing head-on with, I guess, the traditional SI market. And the reason why they're doing it is not because they want to become an SI, but that's such a fundamental component of these broader business transformation deals that they need to build up that IT capability. I called out Dimension Data here because they have created their own partner program, which is called their One Cloud program. So how do we define Dimension Data then? I know we've got a couple of people in the room from Dimension Data, but it's taking those traditional borders between different partner types and really starting to blur them. We're also seeing a lot of the services-heavy partners follow what we call an asset-light, service-rich strategy. They're looking to get rid of their infrastructure assets or to partner with the host or with the CSP in that space, and they're building up the services layer and focusing their efforts in there. So you're almost getting a 2-tier, sometimes 3-tier model start to emerge there. And then we've got new influencers. So digital agencies, strategy consulting firms, industry, as I mentioned. really starting to lead some of the digital stuff, and that means that new types of partnerships need to emerge and new kinds of alliances, and it's looking beyond the traditional competitive environment. What's key for 2016 and beyond, I think, is really defining the value proposition, and that's going to differ from partner to partner, channel type to channel type, but it is confusing. Those borders are blurring. You talk to customers and they don't understand who plays where at times. So very important to be able to clearly articulate where you're playing in that space. And what we're seeing is different strategies start to emerge, whether it's focusing purely on the services, so that service-rich strategy, building out specific solutions, IoT and digital stand out, obviously, differentiating through EU Cloud and having local data residency, and that's obviously been followed a lot by the hosters and CSPs. And then those pockets of specializations. The other interesting dynamic is obviously a bit of what I call a land grab going for ISVs. It's interesting, it doesn't matter who I talk to, if it's an infrastructure vendor, if it's an application vendor, if it's a CSP, they're all looking at the ISV as a sell-to and sell-through opportunity. The challenge with this is it's a very diverse, it's a very big community. No ISV is the same. It's almost like an SMB play, right? And the challenge is obviously trying to target this as a single market is not always easy. But about 80%, well, we estimate that about 80% of European ISVs are still on-prem. We know where the direction of the market is going, so there's opportunities there, obviously, to develop on, but also to host and deliver their applications. So a bit of a land grab, and we're seeing different strategies emerge to try attract and recruit that market. So in closing, I think I've just spent 10 minutes waffling about channel dynamics, but I think this guy actually really summed it up. It's from a large broad-based reseller in the UK, and he said, they're going through their own transitions, and he said it used to be niche or get big, now it's be specialist and give service, and I think that really is, when you talk to customers, very much the dynamic and the pressure that's been put onto the channel. So in summary, if you're a channel partner, depending where you are, proactively address and be conscious of the fact that your resale revenue is going to decline. What does that mean? It's not just building up strategy. It also means you need to be realistic about the kind of sales processes you put in place, how you incentivize your sales force, how you motivate on a recurring revenue model. Alliances, partnerships, I strongly believe, are going to be critical to future success. But there's one thing about meeting and deciding we'll have a joint go-to-market. It's a whole different story to bring that into two different organizations, two different sales teams. You probably aren't happy about bringing another partner into a client, right? So it requires executive sponsorship, it requires executive endorsement, and it needs to be followed through almost as if it were a vendor relationship. And finally, and I didn't go into too much detail here, but what is becoming critical, and you saw when I brought up that architectural solutioning support was seen as more important. This is because this is what customers are asking for. So if you're a channel partner, this is where I suggest build your investments in, or at least push your vendors to give you. If you're a vendor, this is the kind of support that the partners need. And really, when you start getting into those kind of transformational deals, this is where the money will be made. So thank you. Appreciate your time, and I think I'm handing over to